All right, and we are live on another episode with the Lead with Data podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We're streaming simultaneously to all three of those. We've got an interesting conversation for you today. Steve Shwartz is joining us from a angel fund that invests in AI startups, which is something that I've always been very intrigued with. And so I'll let Steve give a short introduction to himself, and then we'll jump right into the content. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, just a little bit about my background. Uh, I started my AI career as a postdoc at the Yale University Computer Science Department in the late 70s, believe it or not.
Wow.
Uh, Founded or co-founded three AI companies in the 80s and early 90s. In the 80s, AI was as hot as it is now. By 1990, all the hype had exploded and AI was a bad word. That third company, I had to take all mention of AI out of the company, and but still, it became one of the leading business intelligence products of the 1990s. And from then on, I became a serial entrepreneur, started several companies, invested in several companies, and have had a couple of IPOs and multiple exits.
Nice. And what was the name of your angel investment group?
Um, so I work with two angel investment groups. The bigger one is New York Angels, and the smaller one here in Connecticut is the Angel Investor Fund.
Okay, cool. Now, you mentioned that back in the 80s, AI was as hot as it was today. And then we went through this thing that people called an AI winter, right?
Right.
Do you think we've got another one of those coming? Or have we reached a point with the technology where AI is just going to be part of everything going forward?
Yeah, I really can't see an AI winter this time. So there've actually been two AI winters. There was one in the late 60s and then another one in the late 80s. And now AI is hot again. Uh, but this time I think it's going to stick. And the reason it's going to stick is because um, it's different than it used to be in several ways. But the important way and the reason it's going to stick is because it's successful. It's producing technology that's changing our lives. Um, we we use voice recognition on our smartphones. We have facial recognition that recognizes the names of our photos. Google Translate helps us talk to taxi drivers in foreign lands. Uh, so AI is here to stay. It's making a big impact, um, and it's not going to go away, despite the fact that it's overhyped again.
Yeah, you feel like it's overhyped?
I do, and actually, I feel like it's overhyped in the same way that it was in the first two AI winters. Um, and what happens is with all the uh, impact that AI is having on our day-to-day lives, it leads us to naturally wonder where it's all going to end.
Hmm.
Are AI computers and robots going to become so smart that they turn us into pets? Um, Tesla founder Elon Musk says AI is humanity's biggest existential threat, and even the
Hmm.
late physicist Stephen Hawking said it could spell the end of the human race. Um, I'm very frustrated with all this fear-inducing hype. Um, it's a dramatic overstatement of AI capabilities by people who really know better. And actually, that's what spurred me to write my book that's coming out in February. Uh,
Yeah. What's that book called?
the title is Evil Robots, Killer Computers, and Other Myths. And the subtitle is The Truth About AI and the Future of Humanity. Um, and in that book, it's intended for a mainstream audience, not a technical audience. I explained in simple terms how the primary AI technologies work, why none of those AI technologies can ever evolve into the kinds of human level intelligence that we see in the science fiction movies. The kinds of vague ideas that today's AI researchers have about moving forward to that kind of intelligence. But there's really no reason to believe why any of it will be successful in the next 10 years, in our lifetimes, or in our children's lifetimes. So that's kind of what the book is about. And then the book also discusses some of the real problems that AI is causing in society, things like discrimination, safety issues, and privacy, and what we can do about them.
Yeah, and another one that I hear pop up a lot whenever it's not as great as a fear as the end of mankind, but there's a lot of people who are worried that maybe their job is at risk, right? That
Absolutely.
AI might be able to perform their job as well, if not better, than they currently do. Are there certain types of jobs that you see as being vulnerable to AI, or other ones that maybe aren't as vulnerable?
Absolutely. But let's start with what's not going to happen. You know, the biggest fear about AI is that we're going to have smart computers that can read every book on the planet in no time and take every class and learn every job. That's not happening. That's off the table. But AI is having a big impact. We can build AI programs that recognize faces and translate languages, but each of those miraculous AI programs can only do one thing. An AI program that can recognize pedestrians can't tell the difference between a dog and a cat. An AI system can't do anything that requires the kind of common sense reasoning that people use all day long. And no one knows how to build computers that can learn jobs by reading manuals or taking courses. So most jobs are safe. The ones that are at risk are the ones that can be characterized as, or at least, you know, these may not even be complete jobs at risk. If you break jobs down into tasks, the tasks that are at risk are the ones that can be classified as classification tasks, especially visual, spotting terrorists in airports, reading MRIs, sorting parts in a factory. And customer service jobs that involve following a script are vulnerable because of advances in speech recognition. But computers can't learn to do anything that requires common sense reasoning. Anything that requires true understanding of language, computers can't do. And that means that any job requiring people-oriented skills in finance, marketing, sales, and HR are probably safe from AI for our lifetime. But they may not be safe from non-AI software.
From what software?
Non-AI software.
Non-AI software. Gotcha. Yeah, so parts of people's jobs may be replaced in very highly specific tasks, and so one of the challenges of AI companies is to not just make a technically proficient, solution for a very specific task, but be able to integrate that with the larger, more broad scope that a person using that application might be able to interface with it, right? Like that user experience component is something that I've been noticing as being, kind of the differentiator between success of an AI project and not. There's a lot of technical questions when you try to take something on as well, but unless you can integrate it into that broader domain of what somebody's doing, it just doesn't make sense in the end anyway.
Absolutely. It's no different than conventional software. So we've had traditional software that you write with if then else rules for 50, 60 years. Those programs have been doing tasks and in some cases replacing jobs for all that time. And as you said, one of the key aspects of any kind of software, whether it's AI or non-AI, is the user experience. Um, the software to be successful, it's got to have a real business application and solve a real business problem or a real consumer problem or some other kind of problem. So it's really no different than other kinds of software in that respect.
Yeah. So since your group focuses in on AI specific, and you're saying that there's a lot of similarities with other software companies, what are the sorts of things that you're looking for in an AI startup that sort of piques your interest or is something that you enjoy investing in? Like, what are those
Yeah,
things that you're typically looking for?
yeah. So yeah, just to be clear, uh, in my two angel groups, um, every investor invests on their own, and I tend to focus on AI related
Uh,
investments, but the groups as a whole are much more diverse. It's one of the advantages of being in an angel group. You have uh, uh, people who were successful entrepreneurs in lots of different areas. So you get finance expertise and expertise in the entertainment business, consumer packaged goods, biotech, insurance, and so forth. So, um, uh, for any given investment, there are always a few different angles, one of which might be AI, that are important, and that's why I like investing with angel groups because you get that expertise to complement your own.
yeah. We got a question from the audience, Aaron Thompson. When you started your career, did you envision AI being at the point it is now?
That's a great question. Um, and you have to understand the environment in AI in the late 70s, early 80s. There was probably as much, maybe even more excitement around AI then than there is now. And we all thought that we were going to be building these uh, machines with human level of intelligence, in the next 10 years. Um, and what we discovered was that it's a lot harder than we thought it was. um, so when the AI winter hit at the end of the 80s, um, I thought, well, that was kind of the end of it. Um, uh, I had some exposure to Jeff Hinton and neural networks, and you know, didn't seem like they were going anywhere. But he kept at it, and machine learning as a whole uh, just really took off, really starting in the late 2000s, and especially in around 2012 when AlexNet broke all the records for image classification. And a lot of that was due to the persistence of the people who've been working on machine learning, like Hinton. So yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise, but a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. So what got you then into artificial intelligence so early?
That's a great question. Um, my PhD is actually in cognitive psychology. Now that said, I was always in computers. There weren't many computer science departments, never mind AI departments. Um, my thesis advisor wrote one of the first AI programs in 1960 on one of those old IBM machines where you put in punch cards. He built a system that could answer natural language questions about the 1959 baseball season. You know, how
Huh.
many times did the Yankees beat the Red Sox by more than 2 runs? That kind of question, which is pretty cool and very advanced given the technology back then.
Yeah.
Um, but it was that, and it was also I was working with another professor named Steve Koslin, also at Johns Hopkins, who was involved in a major debate about how people represented visual information in their brains, which was at the it was one of the major debates in the AI area, which at that time was equally composed of computer science, psychology, and linguistics. And from there, I had spent, as a graduate student, I had spent a summer at a program at the Yale, with the Yale group, and I really liked them. And so it was a pretty easy decision for me to move to Yale.
Yeah, yeah. So after you completed your education, did you jump right into the more entrepreneurial activities? Did you stay on academia? What was that post education journey like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I never thought about getting out of academics. I thought I was an academic for life. And in fact, in 1981, I think, I had accepted a position to be, an assistant professor, a tenure track professor at Brandeis University. And about 2 months before the semester started, Roger Schenk, who was the chairman of the computer science department at Yale and one of the AI pioneers, decided to start a company. And he said, "Steve, I want you to help me start this company." He said, "You'll have much more fun doing this than you will as an academic." And so I did it.
Was he right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was already starting to hate academics. I remember I would get for journals you have these refereed articles, and they basically get people in the field to review the articles that other people submit. So I would get an article to review, and it would take, I would spend a lot of time on hours and hours and hours, and I would send it in, and I'd get a note back. "Great job. Here's 2 more, and they're due on Monday." And I'm like, "Wait a second, this isn't adding up." So yeah, so I was glad to get out, and unfortunately, I had to do it in a way that kind of burned my bridges with some of the academic community, especially at Brandeis, and of course, when my oldest daughter decided to go to college, what college do you think she picked? Brandeis.
Nice.
So I had to say, "Becky, don't take courses from this person or this person."
Yeah. Got a little insider knowledge there from the history, right?
Yeah.
So, not necessarily planning to go into sort of an entrepreneurial sort of, I don't know, I like to call it a lifestyle as opposed to just a career, right? Because being an entrepreneur is totally different than just clocking in, clocking out. What's something that you wish you knew in those early years when you were figuring out what it meant to be at a young startup?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I understood more about business.
Mm.
We had such a big opportunity, especially with those first 2 AI companies, and we really didn't have anybody who knew much about business. My second company, I teamed up with someone from IBM who understood accounting systems, and we built a natural language interface to an accounting system and sold it as a package. And I knew nothing about business. We started sitting down to work on the natural language interface, and somebody mentioned General Ledger. I thought that was somebody in the Army.
General.
And yeah, I think we would have done a lot better if I had more business background.
Yeah, is that something that you see as somewhat common for people who are doing maybe their first or initial few startups, or is that not really a common pattern you're seeing, that lack of business experience?
So yeah, most people who are starting companies are fairly young. Um, and you see a lot of entrepreneurs who really don't have any business experience. They've got a great idea, but no real business experience. And um, they just have no idea how many landmines they're going to trip over. Not that they might trip over, it's going to happen. Um, you know, the last company that I started in 2012, the one I just retired from, um, I was actually retired before I started it, but I met my co-founder.
Re-retired.
I was re-retired. I loved his idea um, for business, and uh, so we start, and I hadn't written any code for a long time, so we started a company. We rented a desk at a co-working facility. The two of us wrote code, made sales over the internet, and did everything, and it was a lot of fun. And then we started growing the company, and I had said to him from the beginning, I'm tired of running a company. I'm gonna teach you how. But over the course of that 7 years, and we did great. We doubled revenues every year. Uh, Fastest growing company in Connecticut, and on the top lists nationwide. Um, but there were so many landmines that my co-founder probably would have tripped over if I hadn't been there. And I don't mean to blow my own horn, because at the same time, I'm the old conservative guy who's always saying no, and he was the guy with all the ideas. But
Yeah, but it's true. In any startup, there's so many things that you only really learn by experience. So,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, just as a quick example, the very first startup I tried to get involved with, we had 6 co-founders, right? And we didn't have distinguished, what we tried to, lay out distinct roles for all 6, but in the
yeah,
end we kind of just put ourselves all at the same level. And you've probably seen that time and time again of how that doesn't pan out, but I had no idea. Now I do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another thing I see is startups. You know, right out of the gate, they have a complete management team. What do you need all those people for? I mean, why would you need a CFO when you're not making any money?
Yeah.
In my last company, we didn't hire a full-time CFO until we were, doing close to $20 million a year.
And you got to give yourself room for growth too, right? Like, part of working with investors, if you're not just bootstrapping your business, isn't just going for money. It's going for that expertise that you bring from years of working with startups, as well as the connections of people who would be the right fit, or potentially the right fit for those sorts of roles. And to your point, you don't need a CFO if you're not bringing in a bunch of money, right? But
Right.
down the line, you're going to save yourself a lot of hiring, firing, or otherwise role restructuring headaches by
Yeah.
not fleshing out that full management team.
Yeah. It's in the life cycle of a startup company. Um, uh, you see two extremes. At the beginning, if you delegate too much, you're really going to get in trouble. And then as you grow, it becomes harder. It becomes harder and harder to let things go. So at the beginning, like my co-founder and I did everything, all the different functions, and then over time we gradually let things go. But there are some things that maybe we held on to for too long. Marketing was one of those, I think,
Ah,
and um, and some things that maybe we let go too early. But none of it, really hurt us because we were close. to where we
Right.
wanted to be along that timeline. But you can make those mistakes in both directions. You know,
Yeah.
at the beginning, the founders really need to have their hands in everything, and by the end, they shouldn't be doing anything.
Yeah, yeah. So I know we're somewhat limited on time here, so I got one more question for you,
Sure.
and it's related to all that stuff. So when you're trying to figure out when and what to delegate, have you figured out sort of your approach to doing that? Is there kind of a methodology you have, or is that really just something that you've picked up through intuition that it's hard to put that into words as to when to know when and what to delegate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think um, the bottom line is, and it's interesting because it was different from my co-founder and me, because the goal was always, for him to become the CEO and delegate everything, and for me to build up the management team, and eventually, retire and just be a board member, which is what I am now. Um, so, what's the right point to delegate everything? And especially for the CEO, I think the right point is when you start saying, I shouldn't be doing this.
Mm,
So, for example, for marketing, you got a pretty successful company and you got a CEO looking at uh, your keyword plan for Google AdWords. You know something's wrong.
yep.
And about a year and a half ago, we finally hired a really good head of marketing, and it makes such a difference, because you've got somebody who not only has expertise that neither of us had, um, uh, but can do it full time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you get that attention on that area of the business that you can't just dedicate to it when you're trying to keep three, four other plates spinning, or maybe a
Yeah,
hundred, depending on the
yeah.
company.
But at the same time, um, earlier in the company's life cycle, we tried hiring a VP of marketing, and it was just too early.
Mm,
They want you bring somebody in, and it's got to be a full time job for them. Um, and if marketing isn't really a full time role yet, they're
is
just going to
there,
be
yeah,
bothering everybody.
is there a place for like fractional, like CMO, chief marketing officer, things like that in a startup? Or do you kind of have like what you described, like until they're a full time role, it's not time to bring them on yet?
I think fractional works very well. Um, in fact, in the CFO role, uh, we went that whole time with a fractional CFO.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
so at the beginning it was an hour a week, and then a day a week, and we finally hired a full time CFO when our fractional CFO was working like, you know, 8 days a week.
You're like, well, something's got to give now.
Yeah, no, it was we waited a little bit too long on that one. Uh, but again, no harm, no foul. We've got a great CFO in there now for about a year, and he's doing a great job, and it's all working.
Yeah. Well, this is all such great insight from you, Steve, who've dealt with your own startups, and you invest in plenty of other startups, so you see these things going on a day-to-day basis. And I tell you that sort of wisdom from your years of dealing with startups is just incredibly valuable. So thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the show today.
It's been great, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, and I'll end the broadcast here and we can chat for a couple minutes right
Great.
afterwards. All right,
Great.
thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks. Bye.